Peter Racy here, Legacy of Expo 88 YouTube channel, and to celebrate the new perspective that the Neville Bonner Bridge brings to the World Expo 88 Peace Pagoda, I've re-edited into a podcast the original John McGregor interviews that were recorded now more than 10 years ago in the lead up to the 25th anniversary of the World Expo 88. John's description and knowledge is without equal in regards to the pagoda, and so it's been a great privilege to re-edit these into this podcast. Enjoy.
To the Nepal Peace Pagoda here at Southbank Parklands, Brisbane, Australia. My name is John McGregor and I'm from Friends of the Pagoda and Foundation Expo 88, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here this morning on this beautiful Sunday morning. My role here is as a guide for the pagoda, and with the 25th anniversary of World Expo 88 coming up next year in 2013, we want to re-engage with the pagoda and with visitors to the pagoda, not only the visitors that come to the pagoda here in person, but also those who visit the pagoda worldwide on the World Wide Web via YouTube. So that's what we're going to be doing with this video, and we're going to be uploading it to YouTube so that people all around the world can learn a bit about the pagoda and its unique heritage and its role during World Expo 88. But first of all, a bit about World Expo 88 and how the pagoda got here. In 1983, Brisbane won the right to host the 1988 World Exposition, and immediately the current Prime Minister of the time, Bob Hawke, sent out invitations through diplomatic channels to all nations of the world to come and participate in World Expo 88. And soon thereafter, the Kingdom of Nepal was one of the countries to agree to participate, and in 1986, the United Nations International Year of Peace, they commenced construction of this beautiful structure which we can see here to represent the Kingdom of Nepal at World Expo 88. It was 2 years of work, over 80 tonnes of indigenous Nepalese timbers from the southern jungle forests in Nepal, the Terai jungle forests, over 80 tonnes of timber, as I mentioned, which was then felled and brought to the capital Kathmandu, where 160 Nepalese families worked for 2 years to carve this beautiful structure. It was then put into two 40-foot containers and one 20-foot container and brought to Australia by a boat, and then was assembled not too far from here, just up towards Southbank railway station near the southern gate of the expo site for World Expo 88. And it was a very popular pavilion at the expo. Many of the pavilions at the expo, as you can imagine, were prefabricated and made out of steel and metal, but this was a pavilion which is lovingly hand-carved and talked of an ancient tradition, and it talked about leisure in the traditional sense as a cultural means of expression. And that's how it fit in with the theme of leisure in the age of technology, which was then broken down into three themes: leisure in the past, leisure in the present, and leisure in the future. So this fell into the theme of a traditional pastime, a cultural leisure pastime. And the pagoda was one of the most popular pavilions at the expo, not only because of its beautiful architecture, and you could also come here to the side pavilions and other parts of the forecourt here of the pagoda, and you could see Nepalese craftsmen doing their work, but you could also visit the inside of the pagoda as well, as you can today. And as you can see, the pagoda has 3 levels. The first level was open to the public, and also the second level as well. And on the second level of the pagoda, they hosted a traditional Nepalese tea house, where one could savour traditional Nepalese sweets and savouries, as well as traditional Nepalese teas as well. So this was a very popular place to escape from the thronging crowds of World Expo 88. Over 70,000 visitors came to visit the pagoda during World Expo 88, and we had many heads of state and presidents as well. And one of the most famous visitors was without a doubt the late Sir Edmund Hillary, champion of Everest. And at that time I was working for a guide for the Japan Pavilion at World Expo 88, and as it should turn out, I had the unique pleasure of being able to personally guide Sir Edmund Hillary when he visited the Japan Pavilion, and when he's visited the Nepal Peace Pagoda here at Expo 88, he had a very warm welcome, and it's evident from his entry in the guest book that he very much enjoyed his visit to the Nepal Peace Pagoda, and that it brought him back many memories of Nepal. At the end of the expo, however, it's the responsibility of the participant to disassemble their pavilion. And the Nepalese government didn't want to do this, but instead put the pagoda on the international market for sale so that it could go to the highest bidder. And immediately a group of people was put together to create a Save the Pagoda committee fund, which was chaired by Councillor David Hinchliffe of Brisbane City Council, who was then the Deputy Lord Mayor. And immediately, government and private funds were collected to keep the pagoda here in Brisbane as a permanent memento of World Expo 88. But there did have to be a public interest test. A significant proportion of the funds did have to be raised from money from the general public to prove that it was in the public interest to keep the pagoda here in Brisbane. So monies were collected from the Australian government, Queensland government, Brisbane City Council, also from the Expo 88 Authority, and also from the general public as well. However, when it came to the last day, there was a $30,000 shortfall, and it was put out in the mass media to this fact that sadly the Save the Pagoda Committee Fund had been very successful, but not successful enough. And there happened to be a retired couple in Holland Park who viewed this story on the TV and then decided to forego their $30,000 trip to South America and decided to put their $30,000 towards keeping the pagoda. So that was Mr. and Mrs. Frank and Mara Pitt, and I know Mr. and Mrs. Frank and Mara Pitt quite well, and they are popularly known as the couple that saved the pagoda, and for that reason Mr. Pitt quite funnily calls the pagoda Pitt's Pagoda. So that's how the pagoda was saved for the city of Brisbane. And when Southbank Parklands was opened in 1992, the pagoda was disassembled and reassembled here on this side facing the Brisbane River. And this is where it's been since that day, and this is where hopefully it'll be for all eternity. The pagoda is in fact dedicated to 1,000 years of world peace, so we at least hope that it'll be here for the next 1,000 years and more. So let's talk a bit more about the pagoda itself. Now, the pagoda, as you can see, has 3 levels. And at the moment, the public can only enter the first level. The second level, which we hope to have as a World Expo 88 museum in the future, is presently not open to the public. But the reason why, let me talk to you a bit about why they are called Peace Pagodas. Now, the Nepal Peace Pagodas are called Peace Pagodas for a reason. It's because they celebrate the peaceful coexistence of Hinduism and Buddhism in Nepal. Now, as you may know, in Nepal, both Hinduism and Buddhism are practiced, and these 2 religions coexist side by side in peace. So through their Nepal Peace Pagodas, you'll find symbolism from both religions communicated through the artwork of the pagoda. And if you look at the pagoda in the central area, you might be able to see above the central archway, there is a Buddha in meditation. This tells us that we're entering a Buddhist place of worship. And directly underneath the Buddha in meditation, we have a makra. We have directly to the left and right of the Buddha in meditation, we have 2 makras, which are water dragons. And you can see water gushing out of their mouths, and this is because they protect the pagoda against the harmful elements of the rain. But directly underneath the Buddha in meditation, we can see 3 curves, a semicircle and a dot. And this is the symbol for Om, or the Hindu concept of the universe. Now, Om is a very powerful concept to the Hindus. They do not believe in a demarcation between the creator and the creation. They view the creator and the creation as one single entity, and that is their concept of the universe. So 2 very important symbols we can see here. First of all, the Buddha in meditation, and directly underneath that, Om, the Hindu concept of the universe, which tells us that we're entering a Hindu place of worship as well. So these 2 religions coexist side by side, as you can see here by the religious artwork symbolism. And we'll go back to the Buddha again, and above the Buddha we find a creature called Chepu, and Chepu is a Garuda. Now, Chepu is a guardian of the universe, and he does this in several ways. But first of all, you see with Chepu, there seems to be clouds coming out of the left and right of his mouth. And this is because they're actually air particles, because he gives life to the universe as he breathes. So he gives life to the universe, but he also has another important role, in that he is the keeper of good in the universe. And how does he do this? He does this through destroying evil. And how does he destroy evil? He does this through eating these serpents, which you can see at the left and right of his mouth. And these serpents are known as nagas. Now, the nagas in Thai Buddhism are a benevolent force, which bring good luck. But in the Nepalese Buddhist context, the Nagas are malevolent and they're evil. And so Chetpu maintains order in the universe through eating the evil serpents, the Nagas, and through, in other words, through eating evil. And to the left and right of the Buddha, we find two dragons, two sets of dragons, and then to the very left and right as well, again, we find a sun here on the left, and a sun and a sun here on the right. This refers to the emblems of Nepal and tells us that the work has come from Nepal. The sun here on the right also has a semi-crescent moon at its base. So you also find these two symbols, as I mentioned to you, on the state flag of Nepal as well. And as we go on to the second and third levels of the pagoda, you can see on the second level of the pagoda there are 6 struts per side, and on the third level of the pagoda there are 4 struts per side. Now, with the second level support struts, these are all Hindu gods and deities. And I should talk to you a bit about Hinduism now. And Hinduism has some 300 million gods, but they do have a Hindu trinity. And that Hindu trinity is Shiva, Brahman and Vishnu. Now Shiva is the most powerful of the three because he's known as the destructor. But he's known as the destructor in a positive sense because he destroys evil and creates in its place a better entity, a good entity. And Shiva can be manifested on the earth in many different ways, as a male, as a female, or as an animal. And one of his most popular or well-known manifestations is as Nataraja, goddess of the dance. And Nataraja can be seen here at the pagoda in the support strat on the second level, the third support strat on the left. And Nataraja is a Hindu word, Nata meaning dance and Raja meaning god, or goddess. So, and you will find, if you do a Google search on Nataraja, you'll find many images of Nataraja. And Nataraja, as I said, she is doing a special dance, and she's doing the dance of the creative energies of the universe. So she's in fact creating the universe as she dances. And we could go on and on about each of the different manifestations of Shiva here, but that is the main one, and that's all we have time to talk about today. And on the third level of the pagoda, which you can't really see here, you have more Buddhist deities carved into the artwork on the third level. And also on the bottom part of each of those support struts, of those 4 support struts per side, we also find the Kama Sutra here as well. And that concludes this part of the pagoda tour. We will now move on to the Peace Bell, where I'll talk to you about the 8 auspicious symbols of Buddhism. Thank you, and I'll be joining you again in a second. Hello again, and welcome back to the Nepal Peace Pagoda for our second video on this beautiful structure. And once again, my name is John McGregor from Friends of the Pagoda and Foundation Expo 88, and we're doing these series of videos to communicate the pagoda story to the worldwide audience through YouTube on the World Wide Web. But you're also welcome to come here to the pagoda on a Sunday morning, where I'll be attending, and I'll be able to take you through the pagoda on a special guided tour. And we're doing this as part of the 25th anniversary of World Expo 88, which is coming up just next year. So in the lead up to the anniversary, and also during the anniversary year, we'll be doing various events and activities here at the pagoda to help commemorate and celebrate the 25th anniversary year. So here we are at the Peace Bell of the pagoda, and as you can see here, here is the Peace Bell itself. During World Expo 88 it was very popular. People would come to the pagoda and they would ring the Peace Bell. Now the tongue of the bell has been removed, but people still find it very popular to come here and try to ring the bell nonetheless. But if you look at the support structure for the bell, you'll see that there are many symbols here, and these symbols are important to both Hinduism and Buddhism. So let's first of all talk about the symbols up here. And if you come here closely, you'll see that there are 3 curves, a semicircle and a dot carved in the very center here at the top. And this is the Hindu concept of the universe, Om. And in the Hindu concept of the universe, the creator and the creation are the same singular entity. So it's a very powerful concept. And this tells us that we are entering a Hindu place of worship. Around the Om, we have 2 intersecting triangles. One triangle facing upwards and one triangle facing downwards. Many people have asked me, is this the Star of David? No, it isn't. This talks to us of a very different tradition, that is the harmony of opposing forces. So up and down, light and dark, yin yang, male, female, etc., etc. So without these two opposing forces coming together and intersecting, there can be no life in the universe. Finally, we have around here, we find the cosmic fireball, which tells us of the creative energies of the universe. So it's a very powerful picture message that we've got here. And just underneath here, we have some of the auspicious symbols of Buddhism and some symbols which tell us where the work has come from. First of all, we have the mandala here. The mandala teaches us about harmony. Next, we have the lotus flower. The lotus flower teaches us about enlightenment. Next, we have the state flags in Nepal, which tell us where the work has come from. Next, we have the inexhaustible treasure vase, which tells us of inexhaustible wealth that never runs out. And next here we have the imperial bulrushes, which tell us of the authority of a monarch. Next here we have the conjugal fishes, which tell us of happiness in a paired relationship. Here we have the victory banner, which is brought forward at the front of an army at the end of a victorious battle. And finally here we have the conch shell, which tells us that the thoughts of the Buddha can be heard all throughout the nation in the same way that a conch shell can be heard all throughout the land when it is blown. So those are the basic stories of the Peace Bell. It's been a pleasure to present these little vignettes for you on YouTube. So far we've done two videos, one on the pagoda structure in general, another on the Peace Bell, and today we're going to focus on this beautiful statue here, that of Avalokiteshvara. And Avalokiteshvara is a bodhisattva, known as an attendant of the Buddha. And her name is quite a mouthful. She is known by several different names in several of the Asian Buddhist countries, and Avalokiteshvara is her Nepalese name. And it literally means he or she who casts his glance down at the world. Other researchers have said that her name means she who casts his glance down upon sound. And I'll go into that name a bit further on. But first of all, let's have a look at the statue. And as you can see, she's only about 4 or 5 feet high. She's on a little pedestal here. Although you can't see the pedestal in the video, the pedestal is actually supported by 2 elephants, representing great strength. And if we look at the statue of Avalokiteshvara itself, you'll notice that she has 42 arms and 9 heads. She also has 2 other heads at the very top as well, which I'll talk about in a second. And the Chinese sometimes call her Chenshou, Guanyin. Chenshou means 1,000 armed. Guanyin is her Chinese name. So she's sometimes depicted with 1,000 arms, not the 42 arms which we can see here and 9 heads. Now when you see a statue in the Christian context with many arms and many heads, you might think it's a ghoul or something like that. But in fact there's nothing ghoulish about Avalokiteshvara at all, because this simply represents her supernatural ability to help and find the lost wherever they may be. So she's able to help many, many people at the same time because of her many arms and because of her many heads and many eyes. She can see and find the lost wherever they may be. So let's get a bit back into her name again, Avalokiteshvara. And what does the term bodhisattva mean? Now, in Buddhism, they believe that every person has the ability to become a Buddha in their own right or attain Buddhahood. But there are the attendants of the Buddha, or the bodhisattvas, who defer their Buddhahood to a later stage in order to help people attain their own Buddhahood first. And once all the sentient beings have attained their Buddhahood, the bodhisattvas attain Buddhahood at the very end. So it's seen as a path similar to the path of a saint or a path of sacrifice. Somebody who helps other people attain their own Buddhahood before they become a Buddha in their own right. And anyway, so as we go on, you'll see that Avalokiteshvara here, she has the 9 heads. She has a crown on each head, which indicates that she is divine. And also at the very top, she has almost looks like a monster's face with a crown of several heads and fangs and so on. And now this is actually her protector, and he wards off evil. And at the very top we can see a little baby Buddha head, which indicates that she will in fact attain her Buddhahood at the very end, after everybody else has attained her Buddhahood. And let's talk a bit more about her name, Avalokiteshvara. if you look at her glance, she's not looking directly at you, she's looking down. So that's the Avalokita part of the word, one who looks down. And Shivara has been interpreted as meaning one who looks down on the world, or one who looks down upon sound. And the second interpretation refers to the fact that as people are suffering on earth, they call out to her for help, and she is looking down upon their sounds of suffering. So that's literally what Avalokiteshvara means. But also in the other Asian Buddhist countries, she is known by different names in their own languages. For example, the Chinese call her Guanyin, as I mentioned before. The Japanese call her Canon. In fact, the Japanese camera company Canon was named in dedication of her. And the Tibetans call her Chenrezig. So that's a bit about her different names in the different Asian Buddhist countries. And so on and so on. You also notice here that she's wearing an antelope skin shawl. And although it's very difficult to see the details here, all around the outside of her shawl you will find engraved the 8 auspicious symbols of Buddhism, which we mentioned at the Peace Bell earlier on in our earlier video. And so on and so on. And she's also carrying several implements as well with her front arms, as you can see here. Amongst them, she carries a lotus flower, which represents enlightenment. She also is carrying some rosary beads and also a trident as well. And that basically sums up our story about Avalokiteshvara. I hope you've enjoyed this little vignette, and I hope you get to see our next video on the stupa in the next few minutes. So far we've done 3 videos, one on the pagoda structure in general, one on the Peace Bell, one on the statue of Avalokiteshvara, and now we're going to talk about this structure here, which is the Buddhist stupa of the pagoda, stupa, S-T-U-P-A. Now stupas are traditionally where relics of the Buddha were kept after his death. And for example, fingernail, a piece of hair, or even his ashes as well. And when the Buddha passed away, Asoka, one of the Asian kings, he distributed the ashes of the Buddha into these stupas and spread them all throughout Asia. And this became a tradition in Buddhism, to have a stupa with a temple that contains some sort of relic of the Buddha. And it's not actually known, however, if a relic of the Buddha is in this particular stupa, but it is here as a symbolic reference to what stupas are all about. And now I'll talk to you a bit about the shape of the stupa itself. And you'll notice that it has a square base and a round top. The square base represents the earth, and the round top represents the heavens. So in totality, it represents the universe. And in this particular stone stupa here at the Brisbane, Nepal Peace Pagoda, we find on each of the 4 corners of the dome top, we find 4 Buddhas. And these are the 4 Buddhas of the 4 compass points, north, south, west and east. And they have their own mascots and they have their own colours as well. And in between each of these 4 Buddhas, we find attendants of the Buddhas as well, or Bodhisattvas. And coming back to the Buddhas again, with the on top of the Buddha as the Buddha's guardian, we find a uniquely Nepalese symbol, that is Chepu the Garuda. And Chepu the Garuda we've talked about in the first video when we were discussing the pagoda structure in general. And Chepu is a guardian of the universe. He guards the universe through eating evil, and he also gives life to the universe as he breathes. And his other important role is as a guardian of the Buddha here. So this is why in many Nepalese peace pagodas, where you find a depiction of the Buddha, you'll find Chepu the Garuda above the Buddha as his guardian. And that basically is a very, very simple explanation of the Brisbane, Nepal Peace Pagoda stupa.
Oh, well, certainly. Go down to Southbank and look at the pagoda and think yourself of why we saved it. It's a thing you've got to see to believe it, and it gets you, and I'm really proud it did.
Well, that's wonderful, Mr. Pitt. Well, thank you very much for your time. I do have a little statement from Councillor David Hinchliffe, who you may remember was the chairman of the Save the Pagoda Committee Fund.
Yes.
And if you don't mind, he's in New York at the moment. He can't be here.
Could have taken us with him. I can talk Yankee.
And as I said, he's in New York, but he has a little statement which he'd like me to read out for you. Is that okay?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Now, this is the statement from Councillor David Hinchliffe, former Brisbane City Council councillor. Whenever I cast my mind back to those heady post-Expo days and the mad panic associated with our battle to save the Nepalese pagoda and keep it here in Brisbane as a lasting tribute, I think of Frank and Mara Pitt and their extraordinary generosity. I also think of that phrase, snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. That's exactly what happened in relation to the pagoda. In order to raise the $250,000 to pay the Nepalese government for the pagoda, I cobbled together grants from 3 levels of government, council, state and federal governments. But all of their grants were conditional. The one central core condition was that we had to demonstrate that there was strong local community support for the campaign. In my negotiations with Gareth Evans, then Foreign Affairs Minister, Graham Richardson, then Environment Minister, Brian Austin, then Treasurer, and Sally Ann Atkinson, then Lord Mayor, the condition of demonstrable public support was absolutely central. The way they insisted we had to demonstrate public support was by setting us a target of $50,000 from the public. If we couldn't do that, then we would not get the grants from those 3 levels of government. The Save the Pagoda Committee organised a fundraising event at a venue in the Valley, which turned out to be spectacularly unsuccessful. With a heavy heart and great personal embarrassment, I announced to Brisbane's media that we had fallen well short of our fundraising efforts, and as a result we would likely lose government funding and of course lose the pagoda. And that's where you and Myra came in, isn't it, Frank?
Yeah.
Because you heard the story on the news.
Yeah, it was on Sunday night. Well, it was on, TV was on Channel 10.
Yes, yes.
And we normally don't look at Channel 10 alone. And it came and I switched it on and it said, the pagoda will be sold to, Eric, was it, tomorrow.
Oh. And that's when you contacted Councillor David Hinchliffe the next day, you contacted the Expo the next day, and you said, we'll put in that money.
That's right. When you've got something that is unusual and an icon, you grab it with both hands.
Yes.
And hang on to it.
Of course, yes.
And
that's exactly what the pagoda was.
oh yes.
Yes.
So we did that, and I said to Mara, she doesn't always agree with me. I said, did you hear that on TV? And she said, yeah. I said, well, let's put the money in. She said, yes.
Well, I'm sure the people
like that shocked me. She usually said no, whatever I find, no matter how good it is.
Well, I'm sure the people of Brisbane and Queensland, Australia are forever in your debt, and I'll continue Mr. Councillor Hinchlife's statement. So Frank and Myra told me that they had put aside some money for a retirement holiday, but they had such enjoyment from the Expo experience that they decided to allocate those funds to this lasting memorial, the pagoda. Remember, it was the 80s and the era when the creed, greed is good, was supreme. Personal excess was everywhere and self-sacrifice was rare. I couldn't believe such selfless generosity could exist in our community at that time. Ironically, it was precisely at our worst moment that our fortunes changed. By announcing the failure of our fundraising efforts so publicly, we generated the publicity that caught the attention of Frank and Mara Pitt, and it was their intervention that resulted in our ultimate success. Life can be funny like that. Frank and Myra are a truly unique couple. They are ordinary citizens whose charity and sense of community is simply extraordinary. I have often been struck in public life that the most extraordinary people I've met have all been ordinary people. It's not so-called celebrities who get things done, it's folk like the Pitts. We will be forever in their debt.